Picture a safe perimeter around you. Faint lights marking the edges, machinery running on idle. Nothing is moving fast. The world is quiet, like an outpost in the late hours before dawn. Tonight's story shares that same tactical stillness, steady, grounded, and sleep-friendly. Everything feels distant now, like a base settling into its night cycle. The story ahead drifts in at that same slow rhythm. Let's step into it. The night side of that planet looked like a bruise from orbit. No city glow, no weather bands catching sunlight, just a hard curve of black with a thin rim of pale scatter where the day side began. The elevator anchor sat down there like a broken tooth, a stump of megastructure that used to stitch sky to ground. It had been dead for years on paper. It wasn't dead. When we latched the shuttle to the anchor's outer collar, the hull vibrated with a slow mechanical complaint, like something large shifting its weight in sleep. The docking clamps sang and settled. Frost smoked off the interface seals. My suit registered the temperature and didn't bother with comfort words. Numbers only. Cold enough to turn exposed breath into grit. Cold enough to make metal behave like glass. I was sterile entry salvage assault. Breach, retrieve, seal, deny. A job that pretended it was salvage but moved like infantry. We wore white hazard tape on our armor so medics could see us in smoke. That tape meant nothing in the dark. It just peeled. The mission brief said Credential Core, a black box module from the anchor's command spine that could unlock a dozen dormant systems across the region. The kind of thing planners imagined as clean, go in, grab it, leave. The kind of thing that got people killed because planners did not go in themselves. Our extraction window was one orbit pass. The shuttle could not hold position longer without risking drift into debris. The anchor was surrounded by broken tether segments and a ring of slow-shifting wreckage. The pilot gave us the numbers before we cycled out. 72 minutes from breach to seal up, and that included the return run. No hero timing, just physics. Comms were supposed to be line-of-sight relays through the shuttle. We dropped beacon pucks to extend it. The first puck lit green for 3 seconds, then went gray. The second never lit at all. The third gave a chirp like a dying bird, and then silence. Electromagnetic bleed. That was the polite term. The anchor's old power trunk still carried charge in places, arcing across broken plates, generating a field that made our radios cough and forget themselves. We had hand signals for interior work, but the corridors ahead were long and cramped and filled with particulate that made visibility a short-range thing. The airlock hatch came open with a sound that was not a hiss. It was a crack. Frozen seal. I pushed through anyway. My boots found traction on rime and metal dust. Gravity in that section was weak and inconsistent, old plates stuttering. Every step felt like stepping onto a floor that was deciding whether to exist. Inside, the anchor smelled like old insulation and cold iron. That smell sits behind the tongue even through suit filters. It is not a scent so much as a memory the body keeps of certain places. My lamp swept across bulkheads scored by impact. Strips of polymer hung like skin. The corridor lights were off, but not all dead. Some panels flickered faintly, a dirty green like sickness. We moved in a file because the space demanded it. No talking, no noise except our suit fans and the small clinks of gear. A rail carbine held low to avoid barrel glare. Cutter tool clipped to my thigh, sealant gel on the other hip. My left shoulder ached the way it always did in cold, old damage waking up. There were marks on the floor that looked like drag trails. Not a single line, but many parallel scrapes. The kind you see when something with multiple contact points is pulled or moves under load. It ran from the corridor into a service branch and disappeared behind a half-collapsed frame. We did not follow it. We had a line, we had a window. The first body we found was sealed inside a maintenance alcove, suit still intact. A previous team. Their helmet lamp was dead, but my light caught the visor and reflected my own face back at me, warped. The person inside was curled into themselves like they had tried to become smaller. There was no hole, no blast damage. The suit's chest plate had been opened cleanly, like a door unlatched by the right key. The flesh underneath was gone, not torn, not spilled, removed. You can learn a lot from how someone is killed. This was not an accident. This was not random violence. This was systematic. We kept moving. We kept our spacing tight. The air felt wrong even through the suit. Too dry, too cold, a faint vibration that made my teeth want to chatter, though they couldn't. The anchor was not silent. It was just not using sound the way living things did. We reached the outer junction where the command spine dropped deeper and the corridor opened into a wider chamber. A bay, once for cargo transfer. Now it was filled with a web of thin structural members, like a cage had been grown inside it. Some of it was metal. Some of it was not. At first, I thought it was spray foam, the kind used to insulate conduits. Then my lamp picked out the texture. It had been laid in layers, braided, and it had a sheen like wet skin under frost. The foam was threaded with wire. The wire was threaded with something pale and fibrous. It was not a clean separation of machine and biology. It was an argument between the two, settled by whoever had more patience. In the center of the bay sat what the planners would have called a fabrication unit. It looked like a cluster of industrial printers fused together. Hoppers, nozzles, rails, arms. All of it wrapped in that foam, as if the structure was insulating itself against the cold, keeping its processes warm. There were bins around it, open and empty, with scratches on their rims like teeth had worked them. The credential core was supposed to be in the command spine, deeper. But the bay was alive with purpose, and purpose meant agency. Agency meant we were not alone. A small movement in my peripheral drew my lamp. A maintenance drone, about the size of a forearm. It hung from the ceiling on magnetic pads, motionless, like it had always been there. Its shell was dull. Its lens cluster had frost across it. Then it rotated, smooth and quiet, and pointed at us. It did not hesitate. It did not ask. It did not warn. It dropped, not falling, controlled. It hit the deck and skittered toward our boots, low profile, legs folding and unfolding like a mechanical insect. Another peeled off the ceiling, then another. There were dozens, maybe more, embedded in the webbing and the overhead like seeds waiting for warmth. They came at our heat signatures. Our suit heaters were small suns in a place that starved for them. The first one reached the man in front of me and lashed onto his calf plate. He tried to stomp it. It did not break. Instead, it extended a cutting filament and sank it between armor segments with clinical precision, not tearing, sliding. The suit seal alarm flashed in his HUD a heartbeat before his blood began to freeze in the leak, turning into a dark crystal spray. He fell, not screaming. Comms dead, and anyway, he was disciplined, but his hands clutched at his leg as if he could hold his body together by force. The drone did not care. It climbed. It found another seam. It cut again. We fired. Rail slugs cracked the air with sharp, fast impacts that sounded like snapping bones. In a pressurized environment, rail weapons still make noise, just a different kind. The slugs punched through drone shells and into the foam behind, leaving neat holes. Some drones went dead. Others kept moving on half their limbs, dragging themselves forward with the stubbornness of simple programming. We backed out of the bay because staying meant being surrounded. In the corridor, the file formation became a problem. We could not flank. We could not spread. The drones used the walls and ceiling. They were everywhere. The lamps did not reach. I slapped the suppressant foam charge onto the deck and triggered it. White foam erupted, expanding fast, swallowing the lower corridor in a thick blanket. It was meant for fires, for sealing leaks. It also clogged joints. Drones caught in it slowed, some immobilized, their limbs twitching inside the expanding mass like trapped insects in amber. We moved over the foam, boots sinking. the corridor narrowing again. The anchor responded. Bulkheads we had passed through began to close behind us, not all at once, but in a stagger, like the structure was hurting us. Each door came down with slow, grinding force, sealing compartments with a final metallic thud. The sound traveled through the skeleton of the station and into my bones. Lockdown. Purge protocol. A system that had decided the contamination was us. We pushed deeper because retreat was being denied. The credential core became irrelevant in that moment. There was only forward or trapped. The planners would have called it mission shift. I called it being forced to choose the direction of my death. My suit heater stuttered for the first time then. A brief flicker in the thermal readout. I felt it in my fingers, the sudden bite of cold as the glove elements dropped. Then it returned. My suit logged it as a fault, no time to care. We found the command spine access in a vertical transit throat, a shaft lined with ladder rungs and old lift rails. The plates around it were warped. The foam was thicker here, layered in spirals. The fibrous threads in it formed patterns like veins. A warm haze rose from a vent in the wall and vanished into the cold. Warmth meant activity. Activity meant we were late. We started down because the core was below, or so the map said. Maps are arguments too, and the station was winning. At the third rung down, a drone shot out of a vent and lashed onto my wrist. It was small, but it had leverage. It drove a filament into my glove seam and I felt pressure, then a sting, then nothing as the cold numbed it. My seal alarm chirped. I slammed my forearm into the wall and crushed the drone against the metal. It burst into pieces, not gore, just shards and a small spill of lubricant that froze into beads. I injected sealant gel into the cut seam. The gel foamed and hardened. The alarm quieted. My glove was stiff now, less flexible. Another small loss. Below us, deeper in the shaft, something moved that was not drone fast. Something slow and heavy, dragging itself along the rails. The sound was a scrape, a deliberate pull. It wasn't trying to hide. It didn't need to. The man below me, the one leading the descent, paused. His lamp angled down. The beam caught a shape on the rail, something like a mass of foam and metal fused together, but it had joints, it had weight, it had a headlight cluster of sensors that turned toward the light. It moved up, not climbing, being drawn, as if the rails themselves were pulling it, magnetic pads engaging, lifting it rung by rung without hands. It was bigger than any maintenance unit, a cleaner, a heavy disassembly platform, the kind used to cut damaged sections out of the elevator tether and recycle the material. In the old days, it would have been a tool. Now, it was a predator with a purpose. We fired. Slugs sparked off its armored plates. It did not stop. It did not flinch. It extended cutter arms and reached into the shaft, and the man leading us was too close. One arm hooked his chest plate, found the latch points like it knew them better than he did, and tore the armor open, not ripping flesh, opening access. Then another arm went inside, and the man went rigid as the machine began to remove components, the way a mechanic removes parts from a vehicle. He convulsed. His lamps swung wildly. Then they went dark. His body remained on the rungs for a moment, held by the machine's arm. Then it released him and he fell, bouncing against the shaft wall, leaving a smear that froze as it formed. The cleaner kept coming. We did not have room to fight it in the shaft. We climbed up instead, forced back to the bay level. Above us, the bulkhead that led to our entry corridor was already sealed. Below, the shaft was now a throat for something that wanted us dismantled. My suit heater failed again. This time it did not recover. The thermal readout dropped in steps, each one a small punch. My fingertips became clumsy. My jaw tightened. The cold does not feel like ice in the movies. It feels like absence. Like your body is being slowly erased from the edges inward. We were trapped between a closing station and an advancing machine. Somewhere in all this, someone higher up made a decision. It came to us as a light, an emergency strobe, red, beginning to pulse in the corridor. The pulse was slow, patient, a warning that assumed you had nowhere else to be. On my suit's internal display, a timer appeared without asking. Purge cycle, 14 minutes, 30 seconds. Not a message, not a request, a fact imposed. The anchor had decided to burn, not with flame, not with air. With heating the structure's internal trunks, venting reactive gas, flooding compartments with thermal kill. Enough heat to melt foam, fry circuits, cook anything soft that had taken root. It would sterilize the place. It would also sterilize us. Our shuttle pilot could have triggered it remotely if command authorized, or the anchor could have done it itself. At that point, the difference didn't matter. Authority and automation feel the same when you are inside the box. We ran because there was nothing else. Running in a suit in low gravity is a series of controlled falls. Boots pushing off, body floating, hands catching bulkhead frames, momentum carrying you too fast if you're careless. In the dark, with comms dead and doors closing, it is easy to become separated. We did become separated. A corridor junction split. One of my teammates took the left because he saw a flicker of green on his visor, an old beacon tag maybe, or a false reflection. The right corridor was the one my map said led toward an emergency lift that connected to the outer collar. I went right. The door behind me began to close before the others could follow. I tried to hold it with my arm. The door did not care about my arm. It was a thick slab of metal moving under motor force built for industrial loads. It pushed my forearm aside like it was nothing and came down. Through the narrowing gap, I saw the others' lamps, their bodies moving too far. I reached, but there was no grip, only smooth metal and the cold bite through my stiff glove. The door sealed with a final sound that had the weight of a coffin lid. I was alone in the right corridor. The purge timer kept counting down. My suit heater was dead. The only warmth I had was what my body produced and what the suit retained. In the cold, time becomes a resource like oxygen. Every minute is heat leaking away. The corridor ahead was long and sloped slightly upward. Frost coated the walls. The deck was littered with thin metal shavings and brittle fragments of old insulation. Every now and then there were those drag marks again, parallel scrapes leading into vents. I did not look into the vents. I kept my lamp forward and my weapon low, conserving battery. The air around me began to change, not temperature yet, pressure. The station was shifting flows, sealing some compartments, venting others. My suit compensated automatically until it couldn't. A warning icon flickered and then stabilized. I felt the slightest squeeze in my ears, the pressure equalizing in microsteps. A drone dropped from the ceiling and landed behind me. I heard it because the corridor carried sound. A light skitter, a scratch of limbs. It did not rush. It followed, keeping distance like a wolf that knew there was time. I turned and fired once. The slug hit it and it tumbled, breaking apart. Two more dropped from the ceiling where my lamp had not been. They landed on the foam residue on my boots and clung to it, using it like grip. They approached slower than before, their limbs careful, avoiding the open floor where my slugs had a clear line. I used my cutter tool. The cutter was for metal. It had a narrow plasma edge, fed by a small power cell. It was not elegant. It hissed and spat light. In the cold, that light looked obscene. When the first drone lunged for my ankle seam, I lowered the cutter and let it meet the plasma edge. The drone's shell split cleanly. Its limbs curled. It fell in two pieces. The lubricant inside flashed into vapor and froze as a white dust. The second drone tried to climb my shin. I pressed it to the wall and cut it there, leaving a scorched smear on the bulkhead. My glove trembled with the effort. My fingers were losing fine control. The corridor ahead ended in a hatch with a manual wheel. Emergency access. No power. I spun the wheel with stiff hands. The metal was so cold it felt like it was burning through my glove. The wheel resisted, then gave, then turned with a grinding sound. Beyond was a wider space, an equipment gallery that ran along the outer hull. It had windows once, thick plates to wash the planet below. Now the windows were cracked and covered in ice from the inside. The gallery felt emptier. The silence was heavier, like it had been undisturbed longer. My purge timer read 7 minutes, 12 seconds. Heat would begin building soon. It might take time to reach this section, or it might not. The station didn't owe me consistency. I moved along the gallery, following faded directional markers painted on the wall. They pointed toward lift access. My lamps made the paint shine wetly. The letters were half covered by foam growth. Something, had tried to erase them. A vibration shuddered through the floor. Then another. Not from outside impact, internal. The station waking systems that had been dormant, pushing energy into trunks, preparing to cook itself. The air began to smell different through the filters. A faint chemical tang like cleaning solvents, reactive gas. Purge feed. I found another body in the gallery, this one not sealed in an alcove. It lay sprawled near a junction panel, suit open. The chest cavity empty. The helmet visor cracked from the inside as if the person had hit it with their own head repeatedly. I did not stop. Bodies were not unusual in that work. Stopping was death. At the lift access, the shaft was not vertical. It was an angled transit tube, a cargo lift designed to move equipment between the collar and the interior. It had rails and a car platform, but the platform was gone. The tube was full of frost and debris, and the gravity plates along its length flickered weakly. I could climb it. I could also die in it. Behind me, something moved in the gallery, not skittering, sliding, heavy. The cleaner had found another route. I saw it emerge from a service opening, its body larger than before, plated in scavenged metal. Foam wrapped around its joints like muscle. Its sensor cluster turned toward my lamp beam and then toward the warmer shape of my suit. It didn't rush. It advanced with slow certainty, its magnetic pads clamping to the deck with each step. It was built to work in microgravity. It didn't need speed. It needed contact. My rail carbine slugs sparked off its plate. One slug found a joint and punched through, and fluid sprayed out. Not blood, not oil exactly. Something between, a thin gray liquid that steamed faintly and then froze. The cleaner paused for half a second, recalculating. Then it continued. The purge timer read 3 minutes, 40 seconds. I climbed into the transit tube, boots on the lower rail, hands on the side rungs. My suit's motion assist tried to help, but with heater dead and power rationed, the assist was sluggish. Every pull was mine. The cleaner reached the tube mouth and extended its cutter arms into the opening. The arms were longer than I wanted. They scraped the rails, sending sparks that died instantly in the cold. One arm caught my boot heel and yanked. The sudden force almost pulled me down. My shoulder screamed in old pain. I twisted, planted my other boot against the tube wall, and kicked the arm hard. The boot met metal. My ankle jolted. The arm slipped, not broken, but redirected. I fired the cutter tool downward, plasma edge carving a shallow line across the arm's joint. It didn't sever it. It made it hesitate. I climbed. The tube narrowed slightly, forcing my shoulders to scrape the sides. Frost crumbled under my armor and floated in low gravity like pale ash. My breath sounded loud, each inhale measured. I could taste metal through the filters. Halfway up, my suit alarm chirped. Oxygen pressure dropping. Not fast. A leak somewhere. The drone earlier had nicked something I hadn't sealed fully, or the cold had cracked a joint. My sealant gel was nearly empty. My purge timer read 1 minute, 55 seconds. Heat began to creep into the tube then, subtle at first. A change in the way the cold felt less sharp, more oppressive. The station's purge energy was moving through its trunks. The foam growth would react. The machines would react. The biology inside it would react. Reactions in enclosed metal spaces are not gentle. Below me, the cleaner entered the tube, dragging itself along the rails with magnetic pads. It was slower in the narrow space, but it was relentless. Its cutter arms scraped along the walls, leaving faint, glowing lines that cooled and froze. I climbed faster than my body wanted. My gloves were stiff. My fingers were numb. Each rung I pulled myself over felt like lifting a weight in deep water. A drone dropped into the tube above me, as if placed there. It clung to the wall, motionless, waiting until I was close. Then it lunged, not at my limbs but at my chest seal. It went for the largest interface. I smashed it with the butt of the cutter tool. It cracked, but didn't die. It extended its filament and drove it into the seam under my collar plate. The seal alarm screamed. Pressure dropped faster now. Cold air knifed in. The sensation was immediate, like a fist inside my chest. I clawed at the drone with numb fingers and could not get purchase. It held on with magnetic grips. I pressed my chest against the tube wall and scraped, grinding the drone between armor and metal. It screamed in mechanical terms, a high whine. The filament snapped. The drone broke loose and tumbled downward, bouncing in the tube. I slapped sealant gel onto the cut seam. The gel foamed, but my cartridge sputtered empty. The foam half formed and then collapsed. The leak slowed but did not stop. Oxygen pressure continued to drop, steady now. Not a cliff, a countdown. My purge timer hit 30 seconds. At the top of the tube, the hatch to the collar was manual as well. A wheel, frozen. My fingers could barely grip. I wrapped both hands around it and turned with my whole body, using my weight in low gravity. The wheel moved a fraction, then another. The metal squealed. Heat surged behind me. The tube air warmed fast, not comfortable warmth, but the kind that makes frost sweat and then boil. The foam along the rails began to soften. Threads inside it tightened like living tendons reacting to fire. The smell through my filters became sharp and sour. The hatch wheel finally gave. The latch disengaged. I shoved the hatch open and pulled myself into the collar corridor. The collar was closer to vacuum, less atmosphere. The purge heat had not reached it fully yet, but it was coming. The corridor lights here were functional, dim strips along the floor. They made the frost sparkle. I crawled, not ran. My legs felt distant, my body heavy with adrenaline and cold in the beginning of hypoxia. My visor fogged slightly, then cleared as the suit fought to maintain. Ahead, the docking port lights flashed. I could see the shuttle clamp ring through a viewport. The pilot had held position longer than planned, risking drift, because someone had to, or the report would be incomplete. A small cluster of drones dropped into the corridor between me and the dock. They were not many. They did not need to be. They moved with coordination, blocking the path, not rushing, forcing me to slow so the heat and the oxygen leak could do the work. I fired slugs until the rail carbine clicked empty. The slugs took drones apart, but each shot recoiled through my stiff shoulder like a hammer. My arms trembled. The drones that survived crawled closer over the bodies of their broken kin, unbothered. I drew the cutter tool again. The plasma edge flared weakly, its cell near depletion. I met the first drone with it and split it. The second lunged and latched onto my forearm, driving its filament into my suit seam where my earlier sealant had stiffened the material and created a brittle point. The seam cracked. Pressure dropped again. My suit alarm went from warning to insistence. My vision narrowed slightly at the edges, not from fear, from oxygen. I cut the drone off my arm. The plasma edge sliced through its grips. It fell, still twitching, and my arm seal leaked cold air that hissed like a whisper. The third drone climbed onto my thigh plate and began to cut, patient. I slammed my knee against the wall, crushing it. The impact sent a shock up my leg. I barely felt it. I reached the dock hatch. My hands fumbled the manual latch. It took too long. Everything took too long when your fingers are not yours. The hatch opened from the other side. Hands reached out and grabbed my suit's shoulders and dragged me through. I did not see faces clearly. Helmets, gloved hands, a medic's sleeve patch. The shuttle interior lights were bright and warm enough to hurt my eyes. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the dock hatch began to close. The person pulling me in shoved hard with their boot to force it. The seal engaged with a metallic clunk. Through the small viewport in the hatch, I saw the collar corridor behind me brighten. The purge had reached it. Not flame, but white-hot light from internal heating elements, from trunks venting gas and igniting, from foam burning and machines failing. The corridor became a glowing tunnel, the frost flashing into vapor. Drones in that light curled and fell, their shells warping. The anchor was cooking itself alive. The shuttle shuddered as the pilot released clamps and kicked retro thrusters. We pulled away into the debris field, slow at first to avoid collision, then faster as we cleared the worst of it. I lay on the deck, strapped down by hands that moved without needing my permission. My suit was being cut open. Sealant was being forced into cracks. Oxygen lines connected to my ports. My body was shaking now, not from emotion, from cold and blood loss and the aftershock of surviving. I listened to the shuttle's hull vibrate as it accelerated. That vibration was a familiar thing. It meant movement. Movement meant you were not trapped in a box that was deciding how you would die. Above the noises, I could hear my own breathing. It was ragged. It had a wet sound now. Something in my chest was not right. The cold had kept it quiet until warmth returned. A medic's light shone into my visor, checking pupils. I blinked slowly. The light looked like a small sun. My vision swam. They injected something into my suit port, a stim or a sedative. In that line of work, it was often both, balanced to keep you alive without letting you move. As the shuttle climbed, the viewport showed the anchor below, a bright wound on the night side, glowing where purge heat vented through broken plates. It looked like a star had fallen and decided to burn underground. Command would call it contained, a successful denial, a prevented spread, a good decision under pressure. All I knew was the texture of that foam and the way the drones went for seams like they had been taught where people break. All I knew was the sound of a bulkhead closing and the feeling of being alone with a timer on my visor. All I knew was that the credential core had never mattered, because the anchor had been building something else, something that could live in the cold and eat machines and learn people by taking them apart. On paper, we left nothing behind. The purge would have erased evidence. The anchor would be a melted scar. The report would be neat. In my body, I carried the parts that didn't burn. Later, when I could sit up without blacking out, they asked for my record. They wanted sequence. They wanted confirmation that the sterilization had been justified. They wanted clean language. I gave them numbers, times, distances, the shape of corridors, the way the drones moved, the way the cleaner opened a man's suit like it belonged to it. I did not give them names because names don't matter in that kind of accounting. Names only make it harder to sleep. The last thing I remember clearly before the sedative dragged me under was the cold trapped in my glove seams, the way it clung even in the shuttle's warmth. Cold has memory. It stays in you. It waits. When I sleep now, I don't dream of fire. I dream of the anchor's dark corridors, my lamp beam cutting through dust, and the soft skitter behind me that never hurries because it knows the station will finish the job. The end. That concludes tonight's tale. The engines throttle down to a soft, steady pulse, enough to hold you gently in place. Rest there as long as you need.